We are now transitioning into the super panel aspect of our program. I've asked Pam Hefner if she'll stay up here. I also want to welcome back the mayor of Salt Lake City, Ralph Becker, along with Chuck Wiggin, John Slay, Dick Tannenbaum, and Judy Hatfield. A round of applause for all of our participants. Mayor Becker, you alluded a couple of times to failed elections in Salt Lake, and then most recently how you went back to the voters with kind of a reconfigured plan and got the 50% you needed, actually with 60% of the vote. But specific to public transit, I think one of our city's forward-looking ideas is that, we wonder when people in this city will be willing to tax themselves for commuter rail or high-speed rail to distant places, those types of aspects. What has Salt Lake City's history shown you about a community's willingness to tax itself for public transit and specifically commuter rail?
Well, I mentioned that the general manager of our transit agency got fired over putting in the first light rail line right after it had failed in the referendum, and the key was getting it open. It was a foreign concept to people in our community, and they had the view, as I think is true in so many cities that are outside of the Northeast and the very dense cities, that rail would never work, that people won't ride transit. But as soon as it opened and people could see it and experience it, the public opinion shifted literally overnight.
Were these riders with choices, or were these people without choices?
These are the riders with choices. The riders without choices were already using our bus system. And so these were riders with choices who just found it was more convenient and accessible, and it was easy to get around. The other thing that happened, I think, that really perpetuated the growth in the system was we had something going on in our region called Envision Utah, which was a public-private partnership where the community literally came together around what they wanted to see for their future. And it was a scenarios exercise where people laid out options of what we have today, how that growth would continue, what options were for the future. And people said, I kind of like this option more than what we have today with development. This was in the mid-90s, so it was a time frame before this kind of real change in, I think, people's perception of views of development. And then what was done as part of that exercise, the Envision Utah exercise, was to say, okay, if this is what you want in terms of your future, it means this is the way we have to invest in our infrastructure, in our transportation, in our parks, in our open space. And people accepted that. The community leaders, whether they were elected officials or business officials, it was a grassroots effort. We had 20,000 people participating, for example. This was in the 90s in responding, before there was a major email effort. And people responded to that. And so when the time came to look at investing in transit, there was this value in the community that was pretty well embedded in the community that, this is consistent with what we've said we wanted. And I think the Chamber of Commerce took the lead, for example, on a referendum election and said, look, this is what we need and want for our future. So it wasn't sort of the environmental community or the transit advocates, it was the business community that really took the lead in stepping forward in a lot of the public campaigns. And that made a big difference, I think, in giving credibility that, this is something that's sort of a smart investment, right, as well as something the public wants.
And certainly it has spurred a lot of development, as you recounted in your talk. Dick Tannenbaum, you were a developer who didn't wait for other people necessarily to go first. You jumped in nearly 10 years ago and believed in this market. What did you see that now has people looking back and saying, Dick Tannenbaum was right? The time was the time to execute.
Better be lucky than smart. Timing is everything, and maps kicked in, and we got great recognition, great pride in our city, and everyone created a demand for industrial. We are at I-35 and I-40. Land prices were ridiculously low right on these major thoroughfares, so we started buying up almost 900 acres in 7 different developments for cash, no interest, so the land price stays the same. And we were fortunate enough to come across some nice distribution centers, manufacturing centers, and that kind of kicked it off. And there is no bad part of town. If you think back 10, 12, 15 years ago, north, south, east, and west, there's great development, and now it's getting more dense. Numbers are going up. Land prices have gone up. We still have some land inventory, and we have a lot of development that's coming because of that. But MAPS 1, MAPS 2, MAPS 2.5, MAPS 3, that's really what's the dynamics and great timing, you know.
You've had to pull off a lot of deals. What's the toughest deal that you've been involved with in the last few years?
You know, I haven't done an easy one. Believe me, they all have a lot of complications. I think this last Boeing deal, 320,000 square feet, 6 stories, tilt wall, just all the dynamics, all of the different divisions of Boeing, they're very sensitive to their contracts, you know, with the government, DOD, planning it, designing it, funding it. Funding was tricky. Thank God for Stillwater National Bank, Doug Morris and his group. I get a half a point off the interest rate if I mention him. I don't know where he is. Remember, you told me that. But that's a monster for us. It's a $40 million deal, and just a lot of folks from Boeing Realty, Boeing Planning. We CO'd it early April thanks to the Public Works Department that are fantastic. Our permit is not online yet, but it sure has come a long way. Dennis Clower kind of got that going. So as difficult as it was, it's now that it's over with. We're still building it out, but we got CO'd, they moved in, the rent kicks in. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. John, I want to ask you on the funding side. It's when you're in a position of leadership, you understand the value of ideas. But then there's the value of a funded idea, and that's extremely powerful. When you have people come to you with ideas, how do you help turn those into funded ideas, and what are the parameters you're looking at?
Well, we try and listen closely and understand and as much as possible share the vision of the developer that might be bringing the idea. And just work with them. I mean, you know, the objective is to get the deal done. We've had success working with particular success working with some of these new tax credit projects that Chuck spoke about. We've done several of those during my time at the bank, and then and just also introducing some other. We have to be creative as well, and part of that is understanding the project and maybe introducing some things that are brought in, some new ideas. These tax credits have been incredible opportunities for the developers and the banks alike in getting some of these projects done. We've also seen some new programs introduced through the SBA that have allowed us to do some small, I say smaller, but up to $5 million of projects. So it's listening to the developer and kind of understanding the needs and trying to match their needs with ours and coming up with a common goal.
What types of development are you having more and more confidence in? If someone comes to you now and says, I have this inner city housing project, or I have this retail development, how is your mind evolving on the confidence in Oklahoma City's market?
I would say more on the retail and office side, the more those commercial. I think we continue to be challenged a little bit on the residential side. We've done a great job here in Oklahoma City and the near downtown area, developing some of these areas. Perhaps not the rush to embrace those projects that we would have liked to have seen, at least on the consumption side, in terms of people buying those up. But there have been some very successful projects in that area. So, you know, as I mentioned here, we're in the business to lend money. We like to hear about these projects. We like the opportunity to sit down with you and hear why you think it makes sense and try and come up with a solution.
All right. Chuck, you've been involved in a number of public-private partnerships. Sometimes it seems like the more complicated it is, the more likely you are to be involved at somewhat. Why have you gravitated toward things like the Skirvin Hotel and the new project that you're opening up in Near North?
Well, the Skirvin Hotel, Mayor, is a project that just seemed terribly important to this community. And I must say that although we had an important role to play in it, it was the last role. I mean, all these other things had been done. The city acquired the site. The developer had been chosen. There were all these arrangements made for public financing and TIFs and so on. And we provided the new markets credits at the end in conjunction with another CDE. But these are, there's both the satisfaction of allowing a project to go forward that has a special importance to the community, and also the fact that these projects usually don't happen unless somebody can work through the details of getting these components to come together. And so we get a charge out of doing that.
Judy, one of the challenges of selling new housing construction in Oklahoma City is the low price of the existing housing stock in the suburbs. As a person who's been working on developing kind of an inner city housing project, how have you had to weigh both on the ultimate consumer side, but also on trying to convince the banking community that a new construction housing project can work and compete with all the existing housing structure that's out there?
I would say one of the most important things to that was the housing study that was done in 2011. We had one in 2005, 2007, 2011, which really gave us where the demand was, and knowing what that demand was gave us the research that we thought was necessary to say, Mr. Banker or Ms. Banker, here's what we need to do, and here's the proof in the pudding. So we were able to see that we had gone from as low as 7% desiring to be downtown, up to 17%, the newest study being 26% of our population in Oklahoma City would consider living downtown. And then as you move into the project, of course, with which I'm most familiar, is Historic Loft. And that was the #1 type of project. So the city and downtown OKC working together to get these kinds in the chamber and getting these kinds of information to us gave us the proof that we could then sit down with the bank and say, okay, here's what's happening. Then we take, here's the actual of, here's what the rents really are versus, what they had been in the past. And we're seeing that people are willing to spend more money to live in the locations that now we are regenerating or generating, like even the new one with the Level or the Edge being brand new projects coming out of the ground. So we have enough history now with about 2,000 downtown living people. I think Ford mentioned that, and Kathy also, and we've almost doubled in the last 5 years in the number of people downtown, and have a huge pin-up demand for what's coming in the future. So that was very helpful.
Pam, you're a native Oklahoman who moved away but has been involved in planning and development. I would assume that when Oklahoma City or the state of Oklahoma is mentioned in the news or the media, you probably take a little special interest in it. Illustrate to us, what is the perspective of our city and our state to someone who lives in Austin, Texas, or perhaps somewhere else in the country?
Oh my gosh, you're really putting me on the spot.
No, I want to be honest, I think our audience would like to hear, a perspective from the outside looking in.
Well, I think a little rural. I think they have no idea what I just saw last night with the Myriad Botanic Gardens and the Cold Court Hotel. That's just amazing. That is big city, world-class stuff. And I think no one would expect to find that here. So, I said, I'm going to Oklahoma City, and someone said, yeehaw. Well, yeehaw, I'm here, and I'm just really impressed. So I think they just have no idea the amazing things you're doing, and just the proactive nature of the people that I'm hearing. It's just the energy behind wanting to bring this to the city is just something I've never seen. So.
Dick, what's next? What's the next 10 years hold? We're all very familiar with the last 10, and you've been a major player in several significant steps forward in the job creation side and the development side. Is it too late? Is it too late for fresh dollars to come into Oklahoma City, or are there still good deals to be had out there going forward?
Au contraire, Mayor. I think it's just starting. Obviously, I-40 is going down. You got a whole core-to-shore development that's going to occur there, make it more dense, all of these wonderful amenities that MAPS 3 is bringing about. We've kept it in the core. I mean, from 2 was the schools, but that was even more significant, but it's coming back, and within 10 minutes you can see the results of all the money that's been spent, both public and then all the private that followed up. In my opinion, what I'd like to see happen is an inland port at Will Rogers Airport. You've got 1,000 acres, Mark Cranenberg and his staff, and Jim Couch and the whole city group. I mean, there's wonderful infrastructure. It's intermodal, except for water. It's ready to go. I've been to Alliance at Fort Worth. We went up to New Jersey, Camden, to see the Rockefeller Inland Port. It's great jobs, aerospace, manufacturing, distribution. It has to happen. I'm not sure what I have in mind they might not agree with, but you know, I'll take off my hat as a developer, put it out there. Let's get a consortium. Let's get, we just heard about the Austin success at Mueller. That has just got to happen. New jobs, new construction. It's perfect, and it's away from downtown. It's a new area that can be developed. You can have housing, you can have retail, but I think the inland port, international inland port, I mean, we're not congested. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal resource. I'll try and get as involved as the city will allow me, Mayor.
Chuck, 10 years ago, I remember asking somebody, what's Oklahoma City's biggest impediment for development going forward? And they said, access to capital. It just seemed like when you're talking about large East and West Coast developers, there were better places for them to invest their money. Is that changing, and what do you see in that regard?
Yes, it's absolutely changing right now. And I think this is attributable to a number of things. Most significant of these is that people have seen that there are not good, solid, reliable places to invest in just in major markets. You know, there's been a tendency for institutional capital to go to major league cities. And those cities, frankly, have continued to attract capital during the tough financial times. But those, the investors that are making those big investments, some people would argue are speculating beyond market indicators. And so money that's spent on the sidelines is starting to think that there are better yields in secondary and tertiary markets. I think Oklahoma City is very well poised today to benefit from these movements of capital. And the fact that we have all these things going on here is a tremendous supporter of that thought process. I think we'll see a lot of people who would not have considered investing in Oklahoma doing so here in the next few years.
Mayor Becker, a question from the audience. It's a little bit generic, but I'm hoping you can fill in their numbers. What's the annual public subsidy for the light rail and the trolley system in your area?
Our transit system, I'll talk a little bit about the structure of it because it does make a difference, I think, in how successful it is. And I don't know who thought of it in the early 70s when they put the system into state law. But it's an opt-in system that's statewide. So local communities at the county level, mostly occasionally at the city level, opt in with a local option sales tax. The sales tax provides about 60% of the funding. The fares provide about 20. It's higher with rail than it is with buses. It's more like 25 to 30% with rail. But and then the federal government's about 20% of the funding. We've put about, I understand with this big infusion of development we're doing now, we've put about $2 billion since 1999 when the first line opened into our rail projects up and down the Wasatch Front. So it's been a major investment, but it's been over a long period of time. And it started out with, I think when we started, the federal funding portion of it was around 80%. We're doing some of these projects now totally with local funding. Some of them have 50-50 local and federal. Yeah.
We're wrapping up. John, interest rates, inflation, what do you see here in the next few months?
So
Always a favorite question for bankers.
Yeah.
And my crystal ball is not any better than anybody else's, but I think it would appear, you know, based on recent data, I mean, if we kind of stay on that trend, interest rates are going to be low for a while. In talking to some of our people internally that kind of work in that area, 18 months, 24 months, we'll start seeing some gradual decline. But the only thing I can guarantee is if I make a forecast, it'll be wrong.
Inflation?
That's the opinion. Again, I don't think it's immediately on the horizon.
All right. Let's show our appreciation to the panelists. Thank you all. Thanks, Dave.